The episode we've just heard in the Gospel, Jesus walking on the water, for me tells us so much about who we are as human beings and who Jesus is as God, and who God is to us and how he works in our lives. Now, it's a common theme throughout Matthew's Gospel, which we've been listening to throughout ordinary time this year, of the characterization of people. And the disciples, as we just heard, are called men of little faith. That phrase keeps being used of them, especially by Jesus, and they are often in contrast with other characters where we're expecting little faith, but they have great faith. Whenever Jesus praises someone for their great faith, it's usually not one of his closest companions. And paradoxically, that's an encouraging thought for us. As we see in that episode, Peter doubts. At some point, he trusts in Jesus. He's even so trusting, he's able to walk across the water himself when Jesus asks him to go. But he still has his doubts. He's still weak like all of us. So that tells us something about who we are. We all know we have our doubts in life. Our faith fluctuates. But it's so important that we keep it there. In times of trouble, it will always come to the fore. And that's what this episode is describing. It's a time of trouble because you've got the boat being beaten by the waves and the headwind comes in. And it's those external things that do make the disciples scared. And we see Jesus entering their lives to come and save them. But he does it at different stages. Because at the beginning, even though they're physically apart and he is alone praying, he's actually praying. You know, Jesus is not spiritually apart from them. That's the constant presence of God in our lives. Jesus praying for us to the Father. That's what he's doing there. But then he has to go a step further because he senses that they feel in danger. So he walks across the water. Now, that's not a usual way for God to come into our lives, because as I'll refer to later, God is actually the calmness. As we heard in the first reading, there's still the gentle breeze. That's the normal way that God is working in our lives. He brings calm. So for Jesus to come across the water, it's no wonder the disciples were alarmed. Their natural reaction, of course, is they think it's a ghost. They say it is a ghost, and they're still afraid. But then Jesus goes the next step, because this is the fourth watch of the night. That means it's probably between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. For us, sometimes we think that God is only intervening at that final hour, at the last minute, at the Fergie time, so to speak. But Jesus, as I said, has been there the whole time praying, and he's still been with the disciples. But he comes and he goes another step further and he says, "Courage, it is I, do not be afraid." With those simple words, he's revealing to them, if those disciples know their Hebrew scriptures, if they know the Old Testament, any time that the phrase, "it is I am," basically he's saying, but that doesn't sound like good English, but he's just saying, "I am." Who else says "I am"? Whose name is "I am" in the Old Testament? It's none other than God himself. That's how he reveals himself to Moses. So every time that phrase is used, it should trigger something in the disciples' mind and in our mind. And then he says, "Do not be afraid." Whenever God is asking anyone to do something important in the Bible, he says, "Do not be afraid." The angel says it to Mary in the Annunciation most famously. And it's that calmness, the courage he gives us. It is, "I'm here, do not be afraid." And then everything is still and calm. And even though the disciples still have their doubts, they recognize him at that point, as the Son of God. Maybe they don't really fully understand what that means. But that is what happens in our lives, I hope you agree. When the storms come and we're being battered by all these things happening to us from outside and in our own hearts, when we feel disturbed or we're suffering or, we just feel under pressure and stressed, there is that constant reassuring presence of Jesus there in our lives, that calmness, that gentle breeze, not dramatically in an earthquake, not dramatically in the strong wind, but in the gentle breeze. He brings the calmness. Sometimes he has to walk on water for us to actually sit up and take notice. But usually those words are all we need. Courage, it is I, do not be afraid.